Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome back to the Daily Palace podcast, brought to you by the Global Sports Podcast Network. I'm Joe Lodge. I booked flights to get some sun in Madrid this weekend, a fortnight ago. It turns out it's going to be 8 degrees and windy there, while it's 14 degrees and sunny in Manchester. I'm now in the process of planning a religious conversion because there clearly is an interventionist God. And as things stand, I don't think they like me. With me today is mere mortal, as far as I'm aware, Dan Tanner. How are you doing, Dan?
I'm doing. I think I'm a mere mortal. I'm not sure. I'll have to double check that one. I might have some divinity somewhere along the line somewhere, but I can't change the weather for you, mate. I sorry about that, but
it's all right. It's all right.
You've got to stay invited every now and again.
Do you feel the spirit moving you on Pancake Day? It could be an early sign.
Maybe, but yeah, I forgot it was Pancake Day. That's always
terrible to miss Pancake Day.
I know, right? I'm gonna have to go down to Sainsbury's and go and grab some ready-made pancakes.
I had a double session.
For Brinner, we'll have some Brinner tonight. We're going to get some bacon, get some sausages, and do some pancakes for dinner.
We had pancakes for breakfast and dessert after dinner. I wanted to have Yorkshire puddings as well, or tone the whole for dinner as a kind of third pancake, but
maybe a little bit
too. Anyhow, today, once we're done chatting about all egg, milk, and flour-based snacks, we are going to speak about the latest on Liam Roberts' punishment for his high kick on John-Philippe Mateta, the impressive loan form of Geoffrey Schlupp, and our favourite Palace hat-trick scorers. So, starting with Roberts, we mentioned on Monday that the FA might extend his ban. They have now deemed that the standard 3-match punishment is clearly insufficient for the offence. There are still a few hurdles to clear before the ban extension is confirmed, and we know how significant it will be. But do you think this is the right decision, Dan? Does this warrant longer than the standard 3-match dangerous play ban?
Yeah, simple. It's probably one of the worst tackles I've seen in a long time, besides from actual sort of breaking of bones or anything. This is one where if it was a slightly different place, you could have taken out his eye, or even a worst case scenario, could have actually killed him. So maybe slightly on that, slightly exaggerating, but that was just a horror tackle. It was not even a tackle, just a complete and utter, stupidity in no way, shape or form about it, really. You look at the behind the goal camera, there is no reason for him to do that. Absolutely no reason. But keepers, the sweeper keeper kind of mentality, you either have to go for it or not. You can't be caught in two minds. But I've never, ever seen a keeper lead with their foot. So I don't know. I have no idea what was going through his head or anything. So him getting more than just a 1-match ban, I think, is warranted. I don't know if I think he's getting 3 or is it 4? I'm not sure.
3 would be the standard punishment for dangerous play, straight red. I guess the idea is that it will now be at least 4, but I don't think there's been any communication about quite how extensive the ban is going to be yet. But yeah, I mean, I agree. I have some amount of sympathy to the extent that I kind of buy that it's probably stupidity rather than malice that led to it, and it was just complete head loss. He felt he had to do whatever he could to get the ball clear, and that was how it ended up once he got himself into that position. But it is so unbelievably, almost unprecedentedly reckless, and the speed at which he's travelling, the position of his boot, as you say, it really could have been a lot worse than it was, and it was pretty bad. I had to put 25 stitches in his ear, reportedly kind of half torn in two almost. So it's I think you just have to, even if the intent of the challenge isn't horrendous, you have to put a significant I don't know, you have to make a statement of this is not acceptable, and it probably does keep it fresher in other players' minds in that split second while their head's starting to go. I don't know, it maybe even helps to make an example of the case and set a precedent that you just can't go into a challenge like that. So even though I feel like it's a bit unusual for an extension to happen like this when the intent isn't particularly malicious, it probably makes sense just as a precedent of no, you can't do that. You absolutely can't. Millwall, as an institution, have reacted to the whole thing a bit strangely, I would say.
I saw this too. If that's what you're going to go with, I think I've seen this too. And I'm like, hang on, what?
So, firstly, 2 points I want to touch on. The fans gave a round of applause in minute 8 of their game with Bristol City last night, which was the same minute that Roberts got sent off against Palace, and that's sort of in solidarity with him and the persecution they feel he's facing. Millwall as a club have now also, so the paper reports, banned Daily Mail journalists from the Den in reaction to their kind of pretty critical reporting of the incident and I guess the Millwall fans present in the stadium on the day's reaction to it. It all revolves around a sense that in the club that Liam Roberts is receiving a lot of grief kind of online, and it's been fueled by the, I guess, reaction of people in the football media and whatnot. Do you have any sympathy with that, Dan? Or do they kind of have to, I don't know, just firm it, accept it was wrong and move on?
It's kind of very dependent on the kind of what they're calling abuse online, because some of it, he did do something incredibly stupid. Like, we're not going to sort of way, shape or form, and you are going to get that for a while. He's going to be remembered for that the same way Zidane was remembered for the headbutt in his basically final international. You are going to be remembered for that for your entire career. So he's going to have to live with that. But yeah, it's very, I don't know if I'd say sympathy, but it's only on the kind of sort of stuff he will be getting online, because this is the age of the internet and what Twitter is like now, which is just the wild, wild west. Anything will be flung around. So some of it you kind of have to either sort of take on the chin or kind of ignore whatever. But Millwall as an entity kind of banning reporters and stuff, I wouldn't say I'm not surprised. This is kind of what institutions or like companies do now when they are being like questioned or anything. It's like, we need to shut this down as quickly as possible and hopefully they'll forget about it. But yeah, it's not going to be forgotten about for a while, at least until the next round, and probably even then it'll be brought up time and time again for the next couple of years. So yeah, sympathy is not exactly what I have, but it's kind of like, to a point is, can we move on from this a little bit? Just remember that it happened. Make the precedent of this is not acceptable in any way, shape or form. And other challenges like this, because there are many that go on throughout the Premier League that are ignored or given yellow cards when they are clearly being very reckless and they're just being sort of passed over and just like, oh, we got the ball first. Not if you go through the player to do it. If you have to commit assault to get the ball, that is a red card offence. That is that simple. Simple as. Yeah. So yeah, it's.
Now, I I think I do have a little bit of I sort of think I've some sympathy for Roberts personally. In he doesn't need a witch hunt against him. He's going to get a long ban, and
Doesn't need that. What?
But I have some. I'm sort of confused by the specific way. So I think it's good that the club and the fans, they're the people who are on his side and should be, and that they give him the sort of benefit of the doubt and are broadly supportive of him and not making him feel any worse about the whole scenario. I mean, that's a bad thing, but the specific way of doing it. So on the round of applause, to do that on the minute he was sent off, I know this isn't how it's intended. It almost feels like glorifying the act or saying that wasn't so bad.
There are two different ways of seeing it. Yeah, it's either they're supporting the goalie for doing it, or they're supporting Mateta. And you'd have to ask a Millwall fan which one they were doing.
I don't think it's
either way, it doesn't sound brilliant.
But yeah, it felt to me a bit like knowing someone who's been rightly convicted of reckless drunk driving and turning up the next day at the pub where they were drinking and downing a pint in solidarity. It's like you can maybe support them in some way, but this really doesn't feel like it's the right message or the right way to do it. And then with the banning of the journalists, I think it's just a bit strange. I kind of get that they might feel some of the coverage has been a little over the top, and maybe I wasn't there in the stadium. I don't know what the volume was, but maybe made too much of a minority of Millwall fans chanting silly things in the moment. But for one, I think some of the media reaction, particularly reaction of ex-pros, which is one of the things that Mill took issue with, because Chris Sutton was on a Daily Mail podcast being very critical, and then there was also like Deeney being pretty critical at half time in the game. With ex-pros, I think their reaction being really critical, gut reaction, immediate reaction being really critical is understandable, because they are really that step less removed from the danger of someone flying out like that. And so even if they might have been a little bit over angry about Liam Roberts' challenge, it comes from an understandable place, because it really is dangerous, and that's why it's been made such a big deal of. So secondly, I think you kind of have to take the rough for the smooth with the media as a football club. Them making a drama out of everything and narrativizing the sport is a big part of why it's so popular and successful, and why clubs are able to function and thrive. And I think you can't, when that narrative goes against you, you can't be too choosy. You just have to keep letting the media in, letting the media be the media to a certain extent. And I mean, within reason, but I don't think this crosses that threshold of ridiculous, out of line criticism of a club that would warrant anything like this. Thirdly, I think it's just sort of irrational, because if you're, don't you know anything about the Daily Mail if you think that banning them is going to take the intensity out of their attacks on you? Rather, clearly it's going to lead to a more intensified media campaign against the club, and they've already been on the receiving end of an article by an op-ed by Oliver Holt titled "Millwall must own their horror tackles and vile chanting rather than banning the press." I suspect that pattern will continue until they're unbanned. So exactly. I don't think you make any kind of
the press is going to do it regardless if you ban them or not. So you're going to get they're going to get a lot of stick for a long time now until they unban them, essentially. And even then, probably the Daily Mail is going to still keep digging it in. So
there are worse things for your image than being an enemy of the Daily Mail, though. So maybe it's sort of a reverse psychology kind of PR game from them. But yeah, I don't know. I think the reaction has been quite strange, and it's I don't know, the sort of siege mentality that's forming around Millwall is semi-understandable, but it seems to me like it's almost promoting Liam Roberts to the role of the real victim of the incident. It's like, no, you're not. You're the man who's had to rush straight to hospital, given oxygen in front of his family at the stadium and all that is the victim.
The guy that got kicked in the head for no reason is the real victim. That's how assaults usually work.
Yes.
The guy that gets hit.
It's struggle argument. But yeah, as a final note on the topic, Geoffrey Mateta has been nominated for PFA Fans Player of the Month. It's not to be confused with the more illustrious PFA. It's not to be confused with the more illustrious EAFC Fans Player of the Month in the Premier League. But I'm sure he'll be nominated for that too. So get voting for Geoffrey Mateta to give him a nice memento of his final glorious month with 2 properly complete ears. With that thought, we will go into a quick ad break and then return to talk about a very much two-eared man, Geoffrey Schlupp.
Your body is unique, and Global Sports Podcast Network has partnered with Bioniq, the world's most personalised supplements. Bioniq provide 100% tailor-made supplements designed to deliver precisely what your body needs at exactly the right levels to optimize your health. No guessing. So click the link in the show notes. Use the code GSPN2025 for 40% off your first month's subscription. Bioniq. Don't settle for off-the-shelf solutions made for just anybody. Get what's right for you right now.
Okay, we will fly through this section really quickly because we've whittled on about Geoffrey Mateta a lot. There's a lot.
We kind of went on a little bit, didn't we? We might want to pick up the pace a little bit.
Frankly, there's
a lot to say.
This one, there's probably not as much to say on. But checking in with one of our boys abroad, Geoffrey Schlupp is tearing things up on loan at Celtic. He barely played this season before being shipped off in January. We all assumed it was the last we'd see of him, but could he be playing himself into a new contract and a role in the Palace team potentially then?
My heart says yes, why not? Let's give him a new contract, because he's been a great sort of cult hero for Palace for many years. He's the Swiss Army knife of substitutes. Basically, put him in anywhere, he'll put in 100%, and you know what you're going to get from him. But realistically, I don't see it. He's getting onto the sort of the tail end of his career. He's in his 30s now. I know that doesn't sound old, but in football, it is. That's when they start giving out the 1-year extensions, or you have these very short-term sort of stays at a club. So I don't see him sort of getting an extension, mainly because we are starting to get some actually sort of better sort of younger players in the squad, especially in his position. So Decore will probably come back next season after being out for a better part of the year. We've got sort of Will Horton, who's now becoming a real sort of playmaker, especially when you've got the reports of Real Madrid might be looking at him. So, which we went through yesterday. If you didn't listen to our podcast, we went through that yesterday and the likelihood of that. But we've just got some good players in that kind of central midfield position now. If anybody's probably going to get a extension on their short sort of deal, would probably be Will Hughes, especially as he's started to really show sort of leadership role in that midfield and be that kind of mentor-ish thing for Houghton, and to a point Devaney probably. Just sort of, he's probably taken them under his wing, just keep an eye on them. So to answer your question, I don't see it happening. I'd be very shocked. but I'd love him to stay, but I just don't really see it happening.
Yeah, no, I think in reality I don't. But I mainly threw it in the running order for a bit of Jeff Schlupp appreciation. He's been playing really well. He put in some really good performances against Bayern, even in the Champions League, and really hit a new level last weekend, scoring and getting an assist from left back against St Mirren. And I'd love it. I would love it if he did play himself back into contention. But realistically, for one, there'll be a good clamour if he keeps us up for him to stay at Celtic, particularly as their other left back, Greg Taylor, is expected to leave in the summer, as he is not showing any signs of signing a new contract himself. Also, if he's there, like if he's a starting left back at Celtic, he's a starting left back at a massive team, and he cannot. They're in that kind of sweet spot where you can play for a team that feels massive, has loads of fans, has lots of buzz around it, gets involved in European football, and not be really a top player. Certainly not anymore. And I think for Schlupp, that's maybe quite appealing at the end of your career. I guess the question marks, the only scenarios in which it could maybe happen are like the Chilwell loan ends, he goes back to Chelsea, Palace are back in need of a left wing back option. It's kind of quick and easy. And Celtic also, I think, sniffing around Kieran Tierney. That seems to be widely what's considered to be, it seems to be deemed semi-likely to come back in. And yeah, that would maybe jeopardise or at least ask a question for Schlupp, because perhaps he wouldn't be the first choice left back in the same way if Tierney were there. But I don't think it's going to happen. But, you know, nice to give Geoffrey Schlupp a bit of credit while he's been playing well out there in Scotland, I thought. And with that, we will give a bit of credit to our sponsors before going into our final discussion on Eagle Hat-Trick Heroes. Here at Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform. Zencastr came out the clear winner. 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs. It's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencastr. So, BGs, blind mice, half packs of beer, all the best things come in threes, and goals are famously no exception. Palace's website alerted me earlier that it's 12 years since the day Kevin Phillips scored 3 for the Eagles against Hull. But what I want to know, Dan, is, if not that, what's your favourite Crystal Palace hat-trick?
I think there's no real competition, and I think even Alex would probably agree with me on this one. It's probably got to be Danny Butterfield's. It has to be. You can't. Besides from right, this is the list of the stuff that this is. Not only is it a perfect hat trick, so if you don't know that, left foot, right foot, header in no particular order. It was the fastest hat trick I think in Palace history of about 6 minutes 40 something. It was in the FA Cup against Wolves. And the piece de resistance, the absolute icing on the cake, is Danny Butterfield is a right back. He's a fullback. When a fullback scores a hat trick, everybody takes notice. Yeah. So it has to be that. There are a couple of sort of other ones. Yannick Bolasie, I think, had one. I think it was Sunderland. I'm not sure if it was Sunderland or not. It might have been Southampton, one of the two. That his was the first hat trick in the Premiership by a Palace player. So, because I was looking up the same sort of thing as you probably did, a sort of the records and going through them all, and it was Championship, League One, League Two, and some of these old ones from the 30s and stuff that I think no longer exist or have been amalgamated into something else. And yeah, he's the only one in the Premiership up until sort of like Mateta and probably even one or two from AJ. But yeah, well, AJ was already gone. But yeah, Mateta has got, I think, 2 or 3 as well. So it's like, and Schlupp, and Balassi was the first one in the Prem. So that's always a nod of the cap as well. But it has to be Danny Butterfield's. It just has to be. It's just so out there. It's such a Palace thing.
Yeah. So I actually didn't pour through the records. I just went straight to Butterfield as well because I think it is so indisputable. So, to add some extra context to what you'd said there, Dan, he was a right back. He scored 9 league goals for his whole career. FA Cup goals not counted in there, but he wasn't a goal scoring right back. It was about it was a few days after Palace had gone into administration, wasn't it? That this happened.
I think it was the beginning of that whole situation. Is like, oh, okay, right, and then it's just like, oh, right, we're going to go score a hat trick. It's cool.
Spirits were incredibly low, and Palace had created a vacancy up top because they just sold Victor Moses, who'd been playing more of a winger, but was playing in the front 2 with Alan Lee at the time. And Warnock claims that the reason he played him up front is that his wife had a dream that Danny Butterfield scored a hat-trick. So
I think I've heard that rumour as well, and it's like, oh, okay, yes, very Palace thing as well. We just go, yeah, we get the get a wife with one of the backroom staff. That's how we do our tactics.
Yeah, I mean, I think if my wife had a dream about Danny Butterfield's glory, I would assume my marriage is on the rocks. I wouldn't think, oh, this thing.
Yeah, you'd think of something completely different, wouldn't you? Hang on, why are you dreaming about Danny Butterfield?
I wouldn't assume it was. Yeah.
What have I done?
Incredible piece of talent inside. But yeah, I also really like Danny Butterfield claiming after he scored that it must be that he still has the instincts from having played up front from under 7s to under 12s. So that's a striker's instinct. And yeah, I mean, I really like. I think it's one of the weirdest things ever to happen in football, because there've been other cases of, we might be saying the early stages of Mikel Merino. Danny Ward, who used to play for Wolves, springs to mind, albeit in the opposite direction, but where a player plays radically out of position, does really well, and then that leads to a change in role. But I don't know if he ever really played up front again. He certainly didn't score any more goals up front.
No, I think he was just a right back. He was just
right back,
and not like Munez or anything. He was nothing overly special. He was fairly solid, championship level right back.
Yeah,
he wasn't bombing down the wing or doing anything like Munez does now, but he was solid. And then gets a hat trick in the FA Cup.
Possessed for 6 minutes 48 seconds. The spirit of Pelé. It's truly exceptional. I think that's all we've got time for. I'm gonna go and send positive thoughts into the air for Neil Warnock's wife to have a dream that I find a massive scratch card on the floor. And yeah, if you've enjoyed listening, as we always say, give us 5 stars. It really helps. Don't forget to vote for Jean-Philippe Mateta for Player of the Month. Thank you, Dan, for joining me.
No worries, mate. Always a pleasure. This one was a good one. Besides from the first half of it, we went maybe a little bit too long, but we're all right.
There's a lot to say on that. Jean-Philippe Mateta, I can talk for days, and it's sometimes hard to control myself. Dan's been talking for what must feel like days as well. He recorded a crossover episode of Ipswich directly before this, so that will be available tomorrow. But until then, it's goodbye.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.